Tonight you have the opportunity to be part of something very unique, and we hope the beginning of a culture change in our school systems. The safety of our kids, both physically and mentally, is the most critical issue facing parents, teachers, administration, and the district. What's different tonight is that the parents are being asked to be involved in this process. Student wellness does not begin and end at the sound of the school bell. So our sincere hope tonight is that you will see the importance of understanding safety procedures at the school level, that you will understand the importance of being involved in the conversation and keeping our kids safe, and that some of you will take action to help make our community safer. December 14th, 2012, 7 a.m. I walk out of an early morning meeting at my office and head back to my desk. I pick up my phone, and the first thing I see is a USA Today pop-up saying, "Newtown school shooting." I then read a text from my wife, "Call me right away." I had already come to Parker to start painting our house, doing our floors in preparation for our move to Sandy Hook. The rest of my family is going to fly out the next day, on Saturday, and join me here. We were all very excited about our move, and surprisingly, the kids were just as excited as us. Those plans changed, and I got the longest flight of my life back to Connecticut. It was a miserably long flight, and unfortunately I had internet access, and I paid attention. I was reading the news. I was going. But I remember specifically I spent most of the time searching for a counselor here. I knew that we were going to be damaged, and I didn't really know the details at that point, but I knew it was going to be rough. I finally arrived and was picked up by my wife at the airport and my 4 kids, and there was a strange silence in the car. And I looked back at my 6-year-old son and a sad face, and all he said to me was, "Well, that was a murdering day." Later that night, when all my kids finally fell asleep in our room for the first time ever, and with the constant sounds of helicopters above our heads, I finally got to hear the details of what my wife and kids went through that day. If you would, please welcome the strongest, bravest woman I know, my wife, Carly Posey.
Thank you all for being here. On my Friday morning, December 14th, 2012, I was out to breakfast with my girlfriends. We were all discussing what our kids were getting for Christmas, the gingerbread house making party that we were all supposed to attend in our children's classrooms that afternoon. I knew this was going to be a difficult day, despite the Christmas spirit we all had, because the very next day my family was moving to Colorado, away from Newtown, away from the life we've made there. Little did I know then just how difficult that day was going to be. In the midst of our conversation, one of my friends gets a call from the town saying, "Shooting in Newtown." We all discussed how we remember there was an attempted robbery years ago at one of the local banks in town, so we just all assumed it must be at a bank. Then another one of my friends, she checks Facebook, and there was a posting that said, "Shooting at a Newtown school." Well, I think it must be at the high school. And just as I think this, my friend sitting next to me gets a call from her husband. She immediately begins crying and she shouts, "It's at Sandy Hook. Our 2 boys are at a house with her husband. They just saw their teacher and a classmate get shot." I didn't wait another second. I grabbed my jacket and I ran out to my car. While I was driving, I called my husband, who was in Denver. No answer. Then I think, what about our daughter, Mila, who is in 4th grade at the school? Where is she? I know our son is out of the school at this yellow house. He had just witnessed horrific things, but at least I know he is safe and out of the school. But what about our daughter? I also know our other 2 kids are at the intermediate school in town, but I think, is Mila still inside the school? I finally arrive at the firehouse. There weren't too many emergency vehicles yet, and I park right in front. I run into the firehouse, and I find our daughter. She is safe. A moment of relief. Her friends were all asking me to call their parents, so I call a few, and then I explain to our daughter what her brother Riken saw, and he is at a yellow house. As we walk out of the firehouse, I see one of my friends who was at breakfast with me. She asked if I have seen her son. He is also in first grade, but he's in a different class. I say all the classes are inside the firehouse. She says she looked, but she can't find anyone from his class. I tell her they must still be evacuating, and we both believe this, since the whole class is missing. Amila is anxious to see her brother Riken. She says she has been worried this whole time about him. She explains what she heard and how the art room classroom door wouldn't lock. So they all had to hide in the art room teacher's office. All she wants to do is see her brother, but we can't seem to find this yellow house. She still talks about this moment as being the worst part of that whole day for her, not being able to see Riken right away. I find my friend whose husband is at the house with our boys, and I call him. He directs me to the house. We finally see Riken. Another moment of relief. When we both see him, he's carrying a lollipop in each hand, and he begins to cry when he sees us. Riken says how worried he was about Amila, and she says the same thing to him. We all hug, and we talk a minute before we head back to the firehouse. Then Riken wants to share with us what he saw just a few minutes before inside his classroom. He said he was at his desk doing his Friday news book, and he heard loud noises. His teacher, Miss Soto, told them to all go to the back of the classroom and to sit on the carpet. Just as they do this, the gunman enters his classroom. His teacher didn't have time to lock the door, since that required her to go out into the hallway and lock the handle with a key. He then says, the gunman pointed the gun at each of them, and then he found Miss Soto and shot her and one of his classmates. He said then he knew this was a very bad guy since he just shot a child. Riken says he watched him the whole time, and when he reached for another magazine and went to reload, Riken saw his opportunity and he ran out of the classroom door. When he got outside, he ran along the sidewalk to the firehouse, the way they had practiced in fire drills. It would have been much safer and quicker for him to run through the parking lot, but he was following the rules. When we finally saw the police report recently, we found out that the gunman had shot 9 bullets to the windows of Riken's classroom, past that same sidewalk that the kids were running down. And when Riken got to the firehouse, it was locked. It was a volunteer firehouse, and there was nobody there at that time of the morning. So they decided to just keep running until a woman saw the 4 of them and sat them down outside this yellow house. They were shouting and crying, and the man who owned the house came out and invited them in. And then Riken asked me, was it okay that I went into this man's house? I say, of course it's okay. He says, you tell me not to talk to strangers or go with people that I don't know. I reassure him he did the right thing. But it's so hard to hear this come out of my 7-year-old's mouth. There's so many emotions going through my body and my mind at the moment. I have to remind myself just to stay calm and get through the next minutes. So we walk back to the firehouse. It is now chaos, something like I've never seen before, or hope to never see again. There's every kind of emergency vehicle there. There's police officers in every kind of uniform, carrying guns I have never seen before. And then I see my friend again, and she says she still cannot find her son. I can see the worry on her face now, especially that I have both of my kids. She asked Riken if he has seen him. He says no. What has happened, I think. But I snap back in the moment when I hear an announcement. They tell all the children to line up with their teachers in the fire bays and for the parents to wait outside. I'm not waiting outside. I walk my children into the fire bays, and I explain to the police officer that's inside that my son will not find his teacher in here, and I'm going to wait with my children. She doesn't have anything to say to this, so we wait in the fire bays with Amila's class teacher. As I look around, I see most of the teachers crying. They're trying to count their students. I would find out later that there was not one teacher who brought out their emergency information, so they didn't have a class list. They didn't have any other information for their students. And even though there was every district person there also, they didn't have this information either. Therefore, later there were some children who were released to their friends or relatives only for the parents to get there later and then not know who has their child. We then hear another announcement. Please find your children and leave as quickly as you can. So most parents leave with their children, except for my friend and the others who don't know where their children are. And at the time this was taking place, I had no idea there was something called a reunification plan. That was not a word that I was familiar with. And we all know now, Douglas County does have a reunification plan, and some of us have seen it in action. Thankfully, they have planned for events like we saw last Friday. I'm sure Newtown had some sort of plan on paper, I would think, but they never thought they would need it. I check again with my friend who hasn't found her child. She's now in a room with lots of other parents. I find her, and she's distraught with fear. I fear that the worst news is about to be told to this room of parents. And I know this is not the place for my children. So I tell them we need to go home, but Riken will not leave until he tells a police officer what he saw. It takes me a while to find one that will listen, though, but we finally do. And she takes a statement. Later that night, we would find out 20 kids and 6 adults were killed that day. This is still so hard for me to even say or process. How could this be true? How could so many children have died that day and mine survived? Like Dave said, he flies into JFK from Denver that night. We wait to tell our kids about Riken's friends who died until we are all together in the car riding back to our house in Sandy Hook. This is a conversation I never imagined I would need to have. It was hard to get these words out to my children, but it was even harder to think about how close I was to having a very different conversation if Riken wasn't able to run out of school that day. So the kids and I have tickets to fly to Denver tomorrow, December 15th. Since Dave decided to come back, we all fly to Denver together. We leave Sandy Hook in the morning, and we arrive at our new house in Parker that Saturday evening. 2 months before all this happened, we decided we were going to move from Sandy Hook to Colorado for my husband's job. In searching for areas to live, we narrowed it down to Parker, Highlands Ranch, and Castle Pines. mainly just because of good schools in those areas. I was really only looking at ratings of schools based on academics. At the time, I didn't think to look at the security in the schools or what the district was doing for keeping kids safe. Before December 14th, I just assumed my kids were safe at school. I was very involved at Sandy Hook School. I was a member of the PTA. I volunteered in my children's classes. I was in that school at least once a week. I attended all the PTA meetings. I volunteered in the library. Never was school security talked about. Never. Not among us parents, not at a school level, a district level. I never heard it talked about, nor did I talk about it. This is why it's so good for me to see all of you parents here and thinking about this. Because like I said before, I never thought about it. I didn't ask questions of my schools in Newtown. I didn't ask, why aren't the classroom doors locked? Why don't you have visitor badges? What happens if the children have to evacuate? And so many more I could have asked. So this is why I'm telling my story, so us parents can be motivated to get involved, to ask the questions, and then search out the answers. After moving here, my kids had to start elementary school in Parker last January. And the only thing I cared about then was how I was going to send my kids back to school and feel like they are safe. So many conversations later with our principal, the vice principal, anybody that would listen to me really, the custodian, teachers, school districts, the school district, I was impressed. Douglas County School District has made our children's safety a top priority, and they haven't stopped working on this issue. They are always evolving, and that is where us parents come in. We can have a voice in this too. We can know what is being done to improve our schools. We can make suggestions, talk to our kids about it. My kids are my biggest source of knowledge. It's a top concern of theirs, and they will tell you what makes them feel safe or not. After I felt my kids were physically safe at school, which I do, I moved on to helping them be mentally safe. And that is when my husband and I founded a Sandy Hook Columbine cooperative with Dr. Carolyn Mears, whose son survived the assault on Columbine. And she also went on to write a book called Reclaiming School in the Aftermath of Trauma. I quickly realized once my kids felt physically safe at school, which is a weekly conversation that I have with them, we knew we were on a long road to mental wellness. So this is my focus now, to help schools be prepared for children who have gone through traumatic events. There are all kinds of trauma kids suffer, and we want schools to be better prepared to help these children. Douglas County has also made this a top priority of theirs, and we're looking forward to continuing working on this issue. On December 14th, when I was having breakfast with my girlfriend and anticipating our move to Colorado, what I thought would be a difficult day for that reason alone turned into a nightmare. While a part of us will always be with those who we love back in Connecticut, Dave and I believe and know from experience it really does take a village to raise a child. We are so thankful and proud that our village is here with you in Colorado. We've met so many great people, some of them sitting right here on the front row, and police officers, everybody has been welcoming, and our family would not be where we are right now in this journey without many people in this room tonight. So we are ready to do our part to make certain that not just our kids, but all kids are safe at school. Our hope is that our story and some of the other ones you'll hear tonight motivate you to be part of this journey that leads to even safer schools.